So, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to introduce our speaker for the closing speech of this conference. After the closing speech, there will still be some reflection, closing remarks from myself and from Arnaud. But before that, we have a very prominent speaker for the closing speech. This is a woman that would normally not need any introduction at all. She is known to all of you, I can guarantee, because it's not very often that a prime minister from a smaller member state earns a reputation like that reaches across Europe and far beyond. This is a country that the Prime Minister is leading, that has a border against an increasingly aggressive and authoritarian Russia. And in that situation, Prime Minister, you've become a figurehead for the support to Ukraine, and you've become a persistent advocate for a stronger European defense. It is an honor for ASD and for EVS to welcome you for the closing remarks. Welcome to the stage.
First, I was wondering how many of you are left as I'm the closing speech here, but I'm happy to see still so many of you here. Although I have ladies and gentlemen, I must say it's a quite masculine crowd. So, dear gentlemen and few ladies. Nearly 35 years ago, on a Thursday in November, a Berlin Wall fell. Wind of change blew across Europe, and 2 years later, Estonia got its freedom and independence back after a half a century in the Soviet prison. My generation is a lucky generation because we didn't have anything. We didn't have freedom, we didn't have choices, and then we got it all. My grandparents' generation is exactly the opposite. They did have everything. They had freedom, they had prosperity, they had choices, and then they lost everything. I also recall another Thursday over 2 years ago, an early February morning when Russia launched the full-scale war against Ukraine. It starkly reminded us that freedom is not forgiven. You have to fight for it. It is our duty as leaders to make sure that for no future generation, freedom will one day be just some memory in distant past. Europe is facing a critical moment that will shape our security for future decades. We need to keep in mind that we have much to defend and a very real threat to defend against. With the right resolve and unified effort, I believe we can succeed. Russia aspires to create its own vision of the world where force prevails at our expense. Russia has shown that it does not care about the ways and means as long as its desired ends remain within reach. We have run out of room for error in second-guessing Russia's willingness to use military force to achieve its hostile strategic aims. We must make sure we would not run out of time, too. As things stand, the Russian armed forces are numerically stronger than they were 2 years ago. Russian military-industrial complex has been mobilized. It produces considerably more equipment and ammunition in every category than the Euro-Atlantic community combined. In a matter of years, Russian military posture at the eastern flank of NATO will likely multiply. The Russian armed forces reform is already ongoing and new units are being formed by our borders in spite of the heavy fighting and losses in Ukraine. This is not the reasonable setting for any kind of negotiations with a country whose credit score of honoring its commitments is close to zero. Let us not be fooled. Russia's long-term interest is the very, very opposite of peace. There are various estimates of how soon Russia will reconstitute and be in a position to attack again. The number, 3, 5, or 10 years, does not really matter. Everyone agrees that they will be ready and willing for next war. All they will be looking for is an opportunity, which we must deny them. Russia is holding every single person in Ukraine at gunpoint, every day, every night. This could be Europe's fate all the same. Or it could not if we choose to act and avoid it. The first and crucial step is to ensure Ukraine's victory and Russia's defeat. What Ukraine needs more is ammunition and air defense, and it needs it fast. Estonia has just sent Ukraine another package of military aid, including ammunition. Ukraine also needs a long-term commitment. We have made the calculations. If all the countries supporting Ukraine would commit to at least 0.25% of their GDP as military aid over the next few years, then Ukraine can win the war. I'm glad to see this initiative gaining support. The war in Ukraine has taught us that deterring Russia requires much more than we initially thought. It has also shown that we need to be prepared for the unlikely, even unthinkable. After all, these unthinkable scenarios are only unthinkable until they happen. Let me outline what needs to be done. Together with our transatlantic allies, Europe needs to establish a new permanent state of defense readiness that will far outlast the war in Ukraine. That is also the mission of first ever European Defense Industrial Strategy. It provides the necessary foundation for the crucial step change of European defense. Europe has entered the period of great awakening about the state of our industrial base. It is widely recognized that we need to ramp up the industrial capacity, not only for Ukraine, but also for ourselves. It is European nations' armed forces whose combat effectiveness is limited by capability gaps and European warehouses that lack sufficient supply for defending Europe. The state of European defense is a strategic challenge that requires also strategic actions. It means, first, a higher overall government spending on defense. The peace dividend is over, and decades-long underinvestment into defense has proved to be a strategic mistake. The total defense expenditure of the European Union member states as a share of GDP peaked at 1.6% in 2005. It has struggled to recover from substantial cuts that followed. In NATO, 2% is the agreed minimum, but not all are doing this. Some allies, including Estonia, are spending more than 3% or even 4%. To meet the demands of the new security reality, more is required from everyone, not only those countries who are really at the border of Russia. It also means filling capability gaps and acquiring and maintaining large stockpiles of ammunition. It means securing our supply chains, working together with our transatlantic partners to shorten and de-risk our supply networks. It also means sharing the burden of risk with industry when it comes to capital investments and spare capacity maintenance. At the same time, competitiveness and the normal functioning of the market must be preserved as much as possible. It means increasing the pool of technologically skilled workers. And finally, it also means preparing our societies at large, because at the time of war, the first effective limits reached tend not to be the raw materials or labor, but social discord and administrative fraction. Research indicates that one of the most important factors influencing defense resolve is the belief in the possibility of victory. However, will to defend is not for granted. It must be nurtured, it must be protected. This task becomes challenging if the necessary tools to fight are not there. We come a full circle again, back to the defense spending and investment. Maintaining a constant state of preparedness is expensive, but it is nothing compared to the costs of actual war, which could reach trillions in a single day, in a single year. This does not have to mean only economic burden. The defense industry is not crucial only for our security. It also creates jobs, boosts economy, drives technological innovation, and other spillover effects. We have been slow learners, but European governments are picking it up. Europe's defense spending trajectory has had a sharp upturn. It reached a total of 360 billion euros last year, a level not seen since the Cold War. More and more of this spending is going towards investments that meaningfully improve our ability to defend. Defense readiness has taken its rightful place at the top of our priority list. We have set course for initiatives offering interim solutions for the most pressing concerns. Finding ways to ensure additional funds for European defense is no longer a political suicide, but an open and daily discussion of a matter of urgency. But we are all still stuck in a chicken and egg situation. Governments expect greater investment and risk-taking from the industry to be able to order more. Manufacturers, at the same time, are expecting long-term visibility and contracts from governments before making capital investments into expanding production. The reality is that both need to take initiative and do more. Fortune favors the bold. For the governments, there has not been more a reason to invest in defense for decades. For the defense industry, the window of opportunity to scale, innovate, and succeed has not been wide open for decades. Only when tapping into this potential at both ends, we can create positive synergy. Good examples are already happening. One European company is constructing a new ammunition plant with over its own investment of 300 million euros. This will add hundreds of thousands of rounds of production capacity per year and create 500 new jobs. Another is planning to eightfold its production of 155mm artillery ammunition within the next 3 years. A third one will reach a fivefold ammunition production increase in 2024 already. All those companies also received a good amount of funding from ASAP, the EU's Industrial Reinforcement Fund. Such funding will be continued and hopefully also increased in the EU's upcoming defense industrial program. Member states also look for ways to significantly boost its budget. Of course, it's up to the governments to create the environment where industry can prosper. As your sole customers, we are often difficult partners, I know. We must do better to cooperate with you and tell you about our needs and intentions. Even more importantly, we must also listen to your ideas and concerns. Only then we can provide the right stepping stones to enable and speed up industrial growth. In Estonia, for example, we are developing our own industrial complex for local ammunition production. In the process, we are removing many of the barriers companies usually face when setting up new production lines in new locations. We are fully aware of the obstacles that companies, and particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, face when they try to attract private investment and gain access to growth funding. That is why I fully support adopting the European Investment Bank's funding policy to also investments into purely defense-related projects. This will be an important signal to a wider capital market that defense industry is an attractive and sustainable investment. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU also needs to dedicate its higher share of its 7-year budget to defense. The current level, a meager 0.86%, is simply not enough. The new security reality is here to stay, and our actions must also correspond. But as we all know, everything in the defense industry takes time. Our opportunity for change may be over sooner than we think. And time matters. Ukraine is buying us leeway to prepare. They are paying for this with their lives, taking out Russian equipment and manpower on the battlefield for the third year. We also need to get serious about scale. Mass matters too. We have seen Russia fire Europe's monthly artillery production in a single day in Ukraine. Instead of days of supply, we need to be talking about months of supply. It is essential to scale up our production capacity to be able to match these demands. Like Kaja Kallas said, and I quote, "The fight against authoritarianism is like a game of chess. It is black or white. But it is not chess. There is no draw. You either win or you lose. The road ahead is long, but I'm confident that together we will call the right shots, once again make freedom triumph over tyranny, and make the future generations proud. There is no other way. There is simply no other way. Let's not be afraid of our own power." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister, for an excellent speech, wrapping up where we are and what we need to do in moving forward. And I think you painted the picture extremely well when you touched upon the fact that freedom is not to take for given. It is something you have to fight for, and there needs to be a will fighting for that. That will need to be nurtured as well. And you kindly agreed to take a couple of follow-on questions to your speech, so I prepared a few. When it comes to the sense of urgency, because you speak a lot about that we need to do this together. So when it comes to the sense of urgency amongst member states, do you feel that that sense of urgency is at the right level amongst all member states? And if not so, what can we do before it's too late?
Yeah. Well, all member states have different historical background, and many have much better neighbors than we do. So therefore, the sense of urgency is not the same everywhere. I mean, a good example of this is the polls that what is the main topic for the European Parliament elections. And in most countries, it was like migration, climate, but in 3 countries, it was defense and security. One of those was Estonia, but actually, and one of those was Poland. But surprisingly, the third one was Denmark. And why? Because Prime Minister of Denmark is speaking about this, is educating the people. Like Plato said, the role of leaders is also to educate people because we know more than they do. So I also feel that when I talk to colleagues that are maybe further away from the war, to explain what is at stake for them. The lessons we have to learn from the 1930s is that first, everything spreads very fast in Europe, and especially now when we are together in NATO and European Union, when something happens in some part of Europe, it will soon happen in other parts of Europe, so we all have a skin in the game. And the point now is to really prepare ourselves, because weakness is provoking the aggressor. If we are prepared enough, he doesn't take that step because the calculation is that I'm not going to win. If we are weak enough, and that means that not all allies are investing enough in defense, then Russia might take this next war because, as I said, they already have like 1 million men under arms. They have the capabilities. They have the production facilities. They will want to use them. So let's make sure that they will not have the chance to do so.
Okay, thank you. So if we move forward and think a bit on now we've seen the launch of the EDIS and EDIP, we're trying to understand exactly how that would all be hammered out. And then we understand that in the next MFF, obviously, there is a discussion about having much more financial power behind those instruments. We've picked up a number of roughly 100 billion floating around as a possible number for EU ambition, financial ambitions in defense. What do you think about that? Is that realistic as a number, or if not, where would you say that the EU ambition level could be?
Some months ago, it was said that it's like 1.5 billion, which was really, I mean, if you know what these things cost, it's not enough. I think 100 billion is already better, but it's like 10, for 10 days, 100 brigades. So if you think what is at stake here, I still think we need more. But I think we have to start from somewhere. As I said, we don't really have time. Ukraine is buying us this leeway. They are the only ones fighting right now, and we have to use this time wisely. If there are funds that we haven't used for COVID, let's use them now. If there are other ways, I mean, Eurobonds, I've proposed to use, then and if that doesn't fly, then propose something else, because the problem is there, the problem that we are trying to solve. Also, the European Investment Bank, getting rid of the restrictions to invest into defense, that would probably, hopefully, also open the private funds that have those same restrictions. I mean, I come from a country where we have a very vibrant tech sector. So we have most unicorns per capita, we have most startups per capita. I gathered all the technological sector, and what they said is that, they see, development of drones, for example. They can be tested on the battleground every day, not in training grounds, but real battlefield in Ukraine. So there's a lot of innovation, but it needs scale, and scale comes from funding, and they are very good in raising capital, but I say, for defense industry, it's closed. All the private funds are closed. So I think when we make the first steps, we could also invite the private funds to take down the restrictions that they can't invest in lethal equipment or ammunition, because this is the need that we have right now, and we have to concentrate the efforts.
Thank you. I take that as an indication as well that you would like to see a number that goes beyond the 100.
But
absolutely,
it's a start.
With a lot of good arguments for that.
Yes.
My last question before we let you off the hook. On the objective with the European member states, and not maybe just the European member states, but all countries supporting Ukraine, the objective could be sometimes seen as different. We get the feeling that some have the objective to make sure that Russia doesn't win the war, whilst others might have the objective to make sure that Ukraine wins the war. Between those two, there's a difference. First of all, do you share the assessment that there is a different objective amongst some of the countries supporting Ukraine? And if so, how does that ambiguity affect the support?
It affects, of course. I mean, you are right to point out that this is different. Whether we say that Ukraine must not lose, or we say Ukraine must win, or we say that Russia must not win, that is a totally different thing. I really like the historian Timothy Snyder, who said that you don't always win wars, but you never win them if you don't set victory as a goal. And that's why I really think that we have to have Ukraine's victory as a goal, because without that, if that is a strategy, we also base our actions on that. And that is actually defining what we do in order to reach that goal. I am, of course, worried, and that's why I'm reading a lot about different member states and their relations with Russia to understand what are the arguments that actually will get to them. And I understand, like I said, we have very different historical experience with Russia, and that also defines how people see this. There are lots of good books. I give them, one is Orlando Figes, The Story of Russia, that I've given to very many leaders in European Union that are not talking about Ukraine's victory and somewhat hesitant, and say that if you don't have time to read the whole book, just read the last chapter to understand what we have to really do. And set victory as a goal. Without that, I don't think we achieve anything. But it's a problem, definitely.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to have you with us. Join me in an applause for the Prime Minister.